comfortable. Okay, you ready to start? You want to start? Ready to start?
Yeah.
Okay, we'll start it. Okay.
All right.
We're going to read the Gosho that we're studying this time is the Sutra for True Requital.
Volume 1, right?
Volume 1, page 928.
928.
This is a very famous Gosho because it's like the Gosho for girls. You can see, like I said before, you can see how long ago I read this. It's been a long time. But again, the idea behind this Gosho is that the Daishonin's teaching is what? What's the greatest importance? Who represents enlightenment in your present form in the Lotus Sutra? Who represents enlightenment as a common, in your present form, attaining a Buddhahood in your present form?
Is it dragon?
The Dragon King's daughter. There you go. What gender is she? She's a female. So the Daishonin's position is that the Lotus Sutra puts the enlightenment of women ahead of all other things. Do you understand? And it happens to be the only sutra that says that women can attain Buddhahood as women. Do you understand? So that's the significance of what we're about to read here. This is from Shinichiyama. Does everybody know who Abutsubo's wife, Shinichi? Does everybody know who that is? Okay. When the Daishonin got exiled to Sado Island, the couple that kind of adopted him and came in the middle of the night to feed him and bring him, warm clothes and food and writing utensils at the risk of their own lives. Because the Nembutsu believers were on a stakeout of his hermitage, his hut on Sado, and they were trying to kill him. They were ready to kill him. They were trying to starve him out. So Abutsubo and Shinichi are the ones that actually kept him alive until he was able to upgrade from that and go live at the Lord's residence while he was awaiting the final position on his sentence. So he writes this in sort of an abstract kind of third-person way. So it starts with, on page 928, the Sutra of True Requital. And again, what does requital mean? Okay, to requite one, it's the action of requiting, okay? That's requital. So requital is to pay back equally. Equally. So requital could be, you did something bad to me, I did something bad to you. Okay? But it also can be the repayment of a debt of gratitude that's equal, commensurate to the act that initiated it. Do you understand? And that's what this is about. This is basically saying that the Lotus Sutra is the Sutra of True Requital for women, because women are able to pay back the fact that the Lotus Sutra is the only sutra that is a teaching that they can attain Buddhahood.
Yes.
Do you understand? So it's actually, if you think about the history of Buddhism and the history of the Soka Gakkai, the truth is that without women, Kosen Rufu could never happen.
Yes.
This is just a fact. Okay? This has been a fact since Nichiren's time.
Yes.
Do understand that. This is a fact that Nichiren himself recognized. Okay? And according to him, he devoted his life to saving women, saving his mother. His whole teaching was predicated on repaying that debt of gratitude to his parents, to his mother specifically. Because the idea is that if you take care of the debt of gratitude to a woman, contained within that is the debt of gratitude to all other things. Because everything begins with the treasure tower. Now, what is the treasure tower really? The woman's uterus, the source, the birth canal, according to the OTT, right?
Yes.
That's what the treasure tower actually is the female reproductive organs of a woman. All right? So he says in the Sutra of True Requital, page 928, in the first year of the Koan era, with the cyclical sign Tsuchi no Tora, in the 6th day of the 7th month, the lay nun Shinichi sent a letter via her husband Abutsubo from Sado Island to a mountain recess called Mount Minobu in Hakiri village in Kai province in the same country of Japan. So you can see how he's writing this. He's almost like he's an author writing in an abstract third person. He says, in the letter, she says that though she had been concerned about the faults and impediments that prevent women from gaining enlightenment, since according to my teaching, the Lotus Sutra puts the attainment of Buddhahood by women first, she relies upon this sutra in all matters. One might ask, who was the Buddha who preached the sutra known as the Lotus? To the west of this land of Japan, and again, he's talking about Shakyamuni now. Okay, he's not going to say Shakyamuni. To the west of this land of Japan, west again from China, far, far, far west, beyond the deserts and the Pamirs, in a land called India, there was a crown prince, the son of a great king named Shuddhadana. When the prince reached the age of 19, he cast aside his rank, withdrew to Mount Dandaka, and took up the religious life. At the age of 30, he became a Buddha. His body took on a golden color, and his spirit reflected the three existences. The Buddha, who illuminated as though in a mirror all that had happened in the past and would happen in the future, taught all the various sutras of his teaching life over a period of 50 years. Even though all these sutras were gradually spread throughout the land of India during the first 1,000 years after the Buddha's passing, they had still not been introduced in China or Japan. Even though it is said that Buddhism was first brought to India 1,015 years after the demise of the Buddha, the Lotus Sutra had still not been introduced. Everybody understands that? So even though Buddhism had been introduced to Japan or to India, or pardon me, to China, the Lotus Sutra didn't come for quite some time. All right? Some 200 or more years after Buddhism was brought to China, a man known as the Tripitaka master Kumarayana lived in a country called Kucha, located between India and China. Does everybody know that's Nepal? His son Kumarajiva journeyed from Kucha, from Nepal, to India, where he received instruction in the Lotus Sutra from the Tripitaka master Shuryasoma. On entrusting Kumarajiva with the sutra, Shuryasoma said to him, "This Lotus Sutra has a deep connection with a country to the northeast." With these words in mind, Kumarajiva set out to carry the sutra to the region east of India, to the land of China. Thus it was more than 200 years after Buddhism had been introduced to China, during the reign of a ruler in the latter Qin dynasty, that the Lotus Sutra was first brought to that country. Buddhism was introduced to Japan during the reign of the 30th sovereign, Emperor Kumei. Everybody remembers, right? Jimmu and Kumei. First one's Jimmu, okay, 30th is Kumei, 32nd is Yomei. Okay, so he says, on the 30th day, a day with the cyclical sign Kanoto Tori, of the 10th month in the 30th year of his reign, a year with the cyclical sign Mizunoi Saru, by King Srongmong of the kingdom of Pacha, which is Korea, to the west of Japan. This occurred 400 years after the introduction of Buddhism to China. Everybody knows what he's talking about, right? He's talking about Prince Shotoku making his advent, okay, and Buddhism being introduced to Japan. He says, although the Lotus Sutra was among the texts introduced then, Prince Shotoku, a son of the 32nd sovereign, Emperor Yomei, sent an envoy to China for a copy of the Lotus and propagated it throughout Japan. Since then, more than 700 years have passed. Okay, everybody's with me, right? Already over 2,230 years have passed since the demise of the Buddha. Moreover, the lands of India, China, and Japan are separated from each other by mountain after mountain, river after river, and sea after sea. Their inhabitants, their ways of thinking, and the character of their lands all differ from each other, and their languages and customs vary. How then can ordinary human beings like ourselves possibly understand the true meaning of the Buddhist teachings? The only way to do so, this is Nichiren saying, this is the conclusion I came to. The only way to do so is to examine and compare the words of the various sutras. In other words, to read all the teachings and then compare them on the basis of the validity of their content, not based on what a teacher says about them. He says these sutras all differ from each other, but the one known as the Lotus is in 8 volumes. In addition, so there's 28 chapters in those 8 volumes, right? So he says, in addition to these, there are the Universal Worthy Sutra, which we know is the last of the threefold Lotus Sutra, which urges the propagation of the Lotus, and the Immeasurable Meaning Sutra, which serves as an introduction to the Lotus, the first of the threefold Lotus Sutra, each consisting of 1 volume. So Universal Worthy and Immeasurable Meanings are 1 volume each. We know that, right? So the 8 volumes and the 10 volumes together. 8 volumes is the 7 volumes with the introduction and the concluding sutra included. When we open the Lotus Sutra and look into it, it is as though we were seeing our own face in a bright mirror, or as though the sun had come out and we were able to discern the colors of the plants and trees. In reading the Immeasurable Meaning Sutra, which serves as an introduction, we find a passage that says, in these more than 40 years, I, Shakyamuni Buddha, have not yet revealed the truth. In the first volume of the Lotus Sutra, at the beginning of the Expedient Means chapter, we read, the world-honored one has long expounded his doctrines and now must reveal the truth. In the 4th volume, in the Treasure Tower chapter, there is a passage that clearly states the Lotus Sutra of the Wonderful Law. All of that you, Shakyamuni, have expounded is the truth. That's many treasures saying that, right? Mm-hmm. And the 7th volume contains the splendid passage that reads, their tongues reach to the Brahma heaven, in order to signify the truth being spoken by the Buddha in the Lotus Sutra. In addition to these passages, we should note that the other sutras that precede or follow the Lotus have been compared to the stars, to streams and rivers, to petty kings and to small mountains, and that the Lotus has been compared to the moon, to the sun, and to such things as the great ocean, a great mountain, and a great king. So he's saying, they've already been compared, the other sutras and the Lotus, and they were compared as minor things and the greatest of things, right? And so then he goes on to say, these statements are not my words, they are all the golden words of the thus come one, Shakyamuni. Mm-hmm. So Shakyamuni made a declarative about what his highest teaching was during his lifetime. And they are the words that express the judgment of all the Buddhas of the 10 directions, because they were all there in agreement with him, right? That's why many treasures was there, to acknowledge that the words and the teaching of the Lotus Sutra were the correct teaching. Okay, right? All of the bodhisattvas and persons of the 2 vehicles, Brahma Chakra and the gods of the sun and the moon, which hang in the sky now, like bright mirrors, watched, right? They were in the ceremony. Are you all with me? Mm-hmm. Are you thinking about the Lotus Sutra while I'm reading this? He says, there are and heard these statements, and watched and heard these statements being made. Okay, so think of the assembly. Do you all remember from the Lotus? Right? Say, the words of the deities of the sun and the moon are also recorded in this sutra. All the ancient gods of India, China, and Japan were also present in the assembly because they came from the 10 directions, right? So everybody was there. The gods of Japan, such as the sun goddess, great Bodhisattva Hachiman, and the deities of Kumano and Suzuka are unable to dispute these statements. Okay? They can't dispute them because they were there in agreement, according to the Lotus. This sutra is superior to all other sutras, declarative by Nichiren. It is like the Lion King, the monarch of all the creatures that run on the ground, and like the eagle, the king of all the creatures that fly in the sky. Sutras such as the Devotion to Amida Buddha Sutra, which is really the Amida Sutra, are like pheasants or rabbits. Seized by the eagle, their tears flow. Pursued by the lion, fear grips their bowels. And the same is true of people like the Nimbutsuba adherents, the precepts priests, and the Zen priests. The Zen priests and the true word teachers, right? So the 4 there. When they come to face with the votary of the Lotus Sutra, their color drains away and their spirits fail. Why? Because the votary of the Lotus is never afraid to debate anybody. All right. As for what sort of doctrines are taught in this wonderful Lotus Sutra, beginning with the Expedient Means chapter in the 1st volume, it teaches that bodhisattvas, persons of the 2 vehicles, and ordinary people are all capable of attaining Buddhahood. So what did he just cover there? World 1 through 9, right? All beings of the 9 worlds. I'll say it again. It says that, in the 1st volume, it says that all bodhisattvas, 9th world, persons of the 2 vehicles, 8th and 7th world, and ordinary people, 1 through 6, okay, are all capable of attaining Buddhahood. Even those from hell, in the world of hell. But as of yet, no examples exist to prove this assertion. It is like so the Lotus Sutra says this, but so far there's nobody that's been able to replicate it. All right? He says, it is like a guest whom we meet for the first time. His appearance is attractive. His heart is brave. And on hearing him speak, we have no reason to doubt him. Yet because we have never seen him before, we have no proof of the things he says, and we find it difficult to believe him on the basis of his words alone. But if we repeatedly see evidence that to support the major points he makes at this time, we will be able to trust what he says from now on as well. So do you understand what he's saying? What's he saying? He's saying there's doctrinal proof there. There's theoretical proof there. But the real key is the ability to produce actual proof. Yes. And he says, just like the stranger, actual proof, that's what he's saying. The Lotus Sutra gives actual proof on top of actual proof on top of actual proof. Our doubts are offset by the power that we see. Do you understand? Our doubts are understood to be functions of the devil of the sixth heaven, trying to obstruct our Buddha eye, the 10th world eye, to see the truth. So that's what he's talking about. But he says, for all those who wish to believe, for all those who wished to believe the Lotus Sutra, what it taught, yet there were no examples of it occurring. Do you understand? And yet could not do so with complete certainty. The fifth volume presents what is the heart and core of the entire sutra, the doctrine of attaining Buddhahood in one's present form. So, if you were looking at Buddhahood from this standpoint of you'll do it in the next lifetime, like all the other sutras teach, yet the Lotus says, no, everybody, just as they are, is able to attain Buddhahood. And you're not able to have confidence in that. He's saying that the Dragon King's daughter should give you absolute encouragement, because this is what Buddhahood is. It's nothing more than that simple realization of the truth. So he says, it is though, for instance, a black object were to become white. That's the Dragon King's daughter attaining Buddhahood in her present form before everybody's saying, how could it be? Where did these bodhisattvas come from, right? He says, black lacquer to become like white snow. An unclean thing to become clean and pure, or a wish-granting jewel to be placed into muddy water to make it transparent. Here it is told how the dragon girl became a Buddha in her reptilian form, and at that moment there was no longer anyone who doubted that all men can attain Buddhahood, right? Because if she can do it, then any man can do it accordingly, right? That this is why I say that the enlightenment of women is expounded as a model for the enlightenment of all things. Okay? Because everywhere else it's been saying women could never do this. They're born screwed up. They couldn't do it. They don't have the demeanor for it, right? For this reason, the great teacher Dengyo, the founder of an Rakuji temple on Mount Hei, who was the first to spread the true teachings of the Lotus Sutra in Japan, commented on this point as follows: neither teacher nor disciples need undergo countless kalpas of austere practice in order to attain Buddhahood. Through the power of the Lotus Sutra of the Wonderful Law, they can do so in their present form. And the great teacher Tentai Chi of China, who expounded the true meaning of the Lotus Sutra first in that country, stated, the other sutras only predict Buddhahood for men, but not for women. This sutra predicts Buddhahood for all. Do not these interpretations make clear that, among all the teachings of the Buddha's lifetime, the Lotus Sutra is first, and that among the teachings of the Lotus Sutra, that of women attaining Buddhahood is first. For this reason, though the women of Japan may be condemned in all sutras other than the Lotus as incapable of attaining Buddhahood, as long as the Lotus guarantees their enlightenment, what reason have they to be downcast? In other words, it doesn't matter that all the other sutras tell you women that you can't attain Buddhahood. The Lotus says you can. Screw the other sutras. As long as you've got the Lotus to rely on, you don't have to worry about those other expedient means teachings say. Now, I, Nichiren, was born as a human being, something difficult to achieve. And I have encountered the Buddha's teachings, which are but rarely to be met with. Moreover, among all the teachings of the Buddha, I was able to meet with the Lotus Sutra. When I stopped to consider my good fortune, I realize that I am indebted to my parents, indebted to the ruler, and indebted to all living beings. With regard to the debt of gratitude owed to our parents, our father may be likened to heaven and our mother to the earth, and it would be difficult to say which parent we are to which parent we are more indebted. But it is particularly difficult to repay the great kindness of our mother. If in desiring to repay it, we seek to do so by following the non-Buddhist scriptures, such as the 3 records, the 5 canons, or the classics of filial piety. What is all that? Lao Tzu and Taoism and what? Confucianism. Thank you. Okay. We can provide, he's saying, if in desiring to repay it, we seek to do so by following the non-Buddhist scriptures such as Taoism or Confucianism, we can provide for our mother in this life, but we cannot hope to do anything for her in her next life. Although we can provide for her physically, we will be unable to save her spiritually. Turning to the Buddhist scriptures, we find that because the more than 5,000 or 7,000 volumes of Hinayana and Mahayana sutras teach that it is impossible for women to attain Buddhahood, it is impossible to repay the debt owed to our mother. Makes sense, right? It's a temporary repayment. It's for one lifetime only. It's not eternal. That's as it should be, because your connection is eternal. He says, the Mahayana sutras in some cases seem to say that a woman may attain Buddhahood or may be reborn in a pure land, but this is simply a possibility mentioned by the Buddha, and no examples of such a thing actually having happened are given. Since I have realized that only the Lotus Sutra teaches the attainment of Buddhahood by women, and that only the Lotus is the sutra of true requital for repaying the kindness of our mother, in order to repay my debt to my mother, I, Nichiren, have vowed to enable all women to chant the Daimoku of this sutra. The women of Japan, however, have all been led astray by priests like Shantao of China, or Eshin, Yokan, and Honen of Japan, so that throughout the entire country, not one of them chants Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, which should be their foundation. All they do is chant Namu Amida Butsu, once a day, 10 times, 100, 1,000, 10,000, or 1,000,000 times a day, or 30,000 or 100,000 times. All their lives, every hour of the day and night, they do nothing else. But both those women who are steadfast in their pursuit of enlightenment and those who are evil make the invocation of Amida's name their foundation. He says, even the ones with strong faith or practice and the ones with weak or straighter faith or practice are still practicing and having faith in the wrong teaching. That's what he's saying. He's saying, and the few women who seem to be devoting themselves to the Lotus Sutra do so as though whiling away time, waiting for the moon to rise, or as though reluctantly spending time with a man who does not please them until they can meet with their lover. Everybody with me? In other words, they're not really into it. All right? They're not doing Kosen Rufu kind of practice. There's still some holding back, reservation based on all the other teachings. They're saying, well, this one says I can attain Buddhahood, but can I really? So it's this depth of faith that he's now lamenting. Thus, among all the women of Japan, not one, even those that seemingly are practicing in accord with the Lotus Sutra, because to practice actually in accord with the Lotus Sutra includes what? Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. It's the 5th half millennium. You don't just look at that sutra. Though among all the women of Japan, not one is in accord with the spirit of the Lotus Sutra. They do not chant the Daimoku of the Lotus Sutra, which is essential for their loving mothers, but instead devote their hearts to Amida. You understand what he's saying? All right, let me say that again. Among all the women of Japan, not one is in accord with the spirit of the Lotus Sutra. They do not chant the Daimoku of the Lotus Sutra, which is essential for their loving mothers, but instead devote their hearts to Amida. And because they do not base themselves on the Lotus Sutra, Amida extends no aid. Reciting the name of Amida Buddha is no way for a woman to gain salvation. Rather, it will invariably plunge her into hell. Why does Amida offer no aid?
She cannot become Buddha.
Yeah, but why does... There's a specific reason. He's already mentioned it here. He's already gone through it here. Why is he saying Amida will not answer your prayer?
Because only Lotus Sutra.
Because you're going against the Lotus Sutra and making a prayer to Amida, because it's after the 5th 500-year period, and the Daimoku has made its advent. So that's why he's saying Amida was at the Lotus at the ceremony as well in the Lotus Sutra. All the Buddhas from all the 10 directions were there. They all gave praise. They all said they would uphold. He's saying that's why you're asking somebody to do something that they will not. They've already taken a vow not to. If Amida answers your prayer, Amida's head will be split in 7 pieces. Do you understand? So he's saying Amida extends no aid. Reciting the name of Amida Buddha is no way for a woman to gain salvation. Rather, it will invariably plunge her into hell. Because Amida's not going to help her, and she's going against the teaching of the Lotus Sutra, the teaching that can save her. In grieving over what is to be done if we wish to assist our mothers, I have realized that the recitation of the name of Amida Buddha creates karma, right? That destines a person to the hell of incessant suffering. That's what the 4 dictums say about Nimbutsu, correct? All right, he says, such recitation is not included among the 5 cardinal sins, and yet it is worse than the 5 cardinal sins. A person who murders his father and mother destroys their physical bodies, but he does not condemn them to fall into the hell of incessant suffering in their next existence. Do you understand what his point was there? Okay, he's saying basically that if I killed you, you're my mother, I kill you, boom, you're dead. I've killed you in this life, but I haven't destined you to hell in the next life just by killing you. If I teach you Amida at a time when you're not supposed to be practicing Amida, I will affect your future life, not just this one by killing you. Do you understand? He says, in other words, by teaching you the wrong teaching for the time, the incorrect teaching for the time, it's worse than if I killed you. Physically murdered you. Do you understand? Yes. A person who murders his father and mother destroys their physical bodies, but he does not condemn them to fall into the hell of incessant suffering, which would occur as a result of slandering the Lotus Sutra after the 5th 500-year period. The women of Japan today who could, without fail, attain Buddhahood through the Lotus Sutra have been deceived into reciting exclusively the formula Namu Amida Butsu. Because Honen said to do that. Discard the Lotus Sutra. Abandon it. Don't even read it. Not 1 in 1,000, not 1 in 1,000,000 attain Buddhahood through the Lotus Sutra, Honen has said. So most people are cut off from ever opening the first page. All the other schools have said, whoa, that you don't even waste your time. So a lot of people don't even waste their time. That's the problem. They have no ability to redeem themselves by reading all of the sutras, as he said is the only way to be able to compare them properly. Do you understand? Mm-hmm. Okay, so he's saying, where am I? Which page? Do you know?
931.
931. Okay. Pardon me. The women of Japan, however, have all been led astray by priests like Shantao of China or Eshin Yokan. Where am I?
No.
The last paragraph. Sorry. The women of Japan today, who could without fail attain Buddhahood through the Lotus Sutra, have been deceived into reciting exclusively the formula Namu Amida Butsu. Since it does not appear to be evil, they have been misled. Since it is not the seed of Buddhahood, they will never become Buddhas. By clinging to the minor good of reciting Amida Buddha's name, they deprive themselves of the major good of the Lotus Sutra. Thus, this minor good of the Nimbutsu is worse in its effect than the great evil of the 5 cardinal sins. Everybody's with me? Mm-hmm. All right. Pardon me.
It's like
the case of
Masakato.
Oh, pardon me, I missed the last part.
Yeah.
It is like the case of Masakato, who during the Shohei era seized control of 8 provinces in the Kanto region, or like Sadato, who during the Tengi era took possession of the region of Oshu. Because these men caused a division between the people of their region and the sovereign, they were declared enemies of the imperial court and in the end were destroyed. Their plots and rebellions were worse than the 5 cardinal sins. Buddhism in Japan today is exactly like this. It is merely plots and rebellions in a different form. The Lotus Sutra represents the supreme ruler, while the True Word School, Pure Land School, Zen School, and priests, by upholding such minor sutras as the Mahayavachana Sutra and the Meditation on the Buddha Infinite Life Sutra, have become the deadly enemies of the Lotus Sutra. And yet, women throughout Japan, unaware of the ignorance of their own minds, think that Nichiren, who can save them, is their foe, and mistake the Nembutsu, Zen precepts, and True Word priests, who are in fact deadly enemies, for good friends and teachers. You're with me, right?
Mm-hmm.
And because they look upon Nichiren, who is trying to save them, as a deadly enemy, these women all join together to slander him to the ruler of the country, so that after having been exiled to the province of Izu, he was also exiled to the province of Sado. Don't forget, who actually got him exiled to Sado Island? Huh? No, I'm saying, who got Nichiren actually exiled? Who sent him off to Tatsunokuchi to get his head cut off, and when that wouldn't work, got him exiled to Sado? It was the imperial court's wives. It was the wives of all those shoguns that were around. It was those, again, yes, it was Heino Seimin, the sheriff that arrested him. But who put the bug in the ear of the officials that Nichiren needed to be gotten rid of? It was the females that were listening to the priests that were supporting the court. It was those schools that the emperor was supporting with temples and so forth that actually created this circumstance where he got exiled to Asada. Here I, Nichiren, that wasn't the emperor going, I've decided Nichiren's a bad guy. That isn't what happened. Okay? It was all of the women talking about this terrible guy that's saying, cut off the heads of the Nembutsu priests and burn the temples and all those things. All those things that he was questioned about when Heino Seimin brought him in. And he said, yeah, I said all that stuff. Do you guys not remember any of this? Or do you remember all this? All right, so sorry. We'll just, you read it enough times, you'll know.
Mm-hmm.
Here I, Nichiren, made a vow and declared there is absolutely no fault on my part. And even if I should be mistaken, the fact remains that I have made a vow to save all women in Japan. And that sincerity cannot be ignored, especially since what I am saying is in complete accord with the Lotus Sutra. If the women of Japan do not choose to put faith in me, then they should let the matter rest there. They shouldn't slander me a step further. Do you understand? He says, on the contrary, however, they set about having me attacked. Having me attacked. Heino Seimin. Men who are in power with swords. That's the power of women. They can control men. Men do all the bad stuff. A lot of the bad stuff is caused by the influence of the women on the men, frankly speaking. Right? If women of Japan do not choose to put faith in me, then they should let the matter rest there. On the contrary, however, they have set about having me attacked. Am I in error? How will Shakyamuni many treasures, the Buddhas of the 10 directions, the Bodhisattvas, the people of the 2 vehicles, Brahma, Chakra, and the 4 heavenly kings deal with this? If I am in error, show me how. In particular, the gods of the sun and the moon are right before me. And since, in addition to listening to the words of Shakyamuni Buddha, you also vowed to punish those who persecute the votary of the Lotus Sutra, saying their heads will be split into 7 pieces. Now he's talking as though he's speaking to the Buddhist gods, right? Mm-hmm. What then do you intend to do? Because Nichiren strongly called them to task, the Buddhist gods, the protective deities, in this manner, the heavenly gods have inflicted punishment on this land, and these epidemics have appeared. Everybody with me? Okay, he's giving a religious reason why these secular things are occurring. By rights, he's talking about the actual karma that's at the root of the suffering of the people in his country. By rights, the heavenly gods should command another nation to punish our country. But too many people on both sides would perish. Thus, the design of the heavenly gods is to avoid a general conflict and instead to first destroy the people in this epidemic, which is in effect cutting off the ruler's hands and feet, thereby compelling the ruler and high ministers of this nation to honor the Lotus Sutra. Now, do you remember what occurred, though, in this process? As all these things that Nichiren, we just read this in the last Go Show. He starts out by saying all this bad shit's going to happen if you don't listen to what I'm saying. They don't listen to him. He then just keeps calling out every time there's a circumstance that actually enforces what he's already said. And that by the time the Mongols were ready to invade again, there were lots of people that had had doubts before, but now he's made it back from Sado Island. He didn't die on Izu, he didn't die at Tatsunokuchi, he didn't die on Sado, and he's gone like this to everybody when they asked to give him another temple and just be chilled out. Okay, he's gone off to Minobu. He's gotten the respect or the fear, if nothing else, of many others that don't understand where his power is coming from because they don't understand the truth of the Lotus Sutra. So he's saying, by rights, the heavenly gods should command other nations to punish our country for punishing me. But too many people on both sides would perish. Thus, the design of the heavenly gods is to avoid a general conflict and instead to first destroy the people in this epidemic, which is in effect cutting off the ruler's hands and feet, thereby compelling the ruler and high ministers of this nation to honor the Lotus Sutra. In this way, they intend to wipe out the enemies of the Lotus Sutra and make way for the propagation of the correct teaching, which is what in fact occurred. Nevertheless, when I was exiled to the province of Sado, the constable of the province and other officials following the design of the ruler of the nation treated me with animosity, and the people went along with those orders. In addition, the Nimbutsu Zen precepts and true words priests in Kamakura, where the shogunate was, where the true, not Kyoto, where the true center of power was, sent word that by no means should I be allowed to return from the island of Sado. Make sure this guy dies there. Ryokan specifically, of Gorakuji Temple and others, persuaded the former governor of the province of Masashi to issue his own letters of instruction, which were carried to Sado by Ryokan's disciples, ordering him that I be persecuted. Thus it seemed that I could not possibly escape with my life. Whatever the design of the heavenly gods in this manner may have been, every single steward and Nimbutsu believer worthy of the name kept strict watch on my hut day and night, determined to prevent anyone from communicating with me. Never in any lifetime will I forget how in those circumstances you, Shinichi, and a Butsubo, with a Butsubo carrying a wooden container of food on his back, came in the night again and again to bring me aid. It was just as if my deceased mother had suddenly been reborn in the province of Sado. He had never made it on Sado Island without these two people that he's writing to right now. Once in China, there was a man known as the governor of Pei. Because there were signs indicating that he would become the ruler, the first emperor of the Qin dynasty decreed that unparalleled rewards would be bestowed upon anyone who would kill him. The governor thought it would be too dangerous to try to conceal himself in the country villages. So he entered the mountains, where he remained hidden for 7 days, and then for another 7. At that time, he believed that his life was as good as lost. But the governor had a wife of the Liu family who went searching for him in the mountains, and from time to time would bring him food to keep him alive. Being the governor's wife, she could not help but feel compassion for him. But in your case, you had not been concerned about the life to come. Pardon me. But in your case, had you not been concerned about the life to come, would you have shown me such devotion? And that is also the reason why you have remained steadfast throughout, even when you were driven from your own land, fined, and had your house taken from you. In the Lotus Sutra, it is said that one who in the past has made offerings to 100,000 million Buddhas will, when reborn in the later existence, be unshakable in faith. You then must be a woman who has made offerings to 100,000 million Buddhas, 10 billion Buddhas. In addition, it is easy to sustain concern for someone who is before our very eyes, but quite a different thing when that person is far away, even though in our hearts we may not forget him. Nevertheless, in these 5 years, from the 11th year of the Brunei era, to this year, the first year of the Koan era, you have already passed since I have come to live here in the mountains. You have sent, in the 5 years that have already passed, since I came here to live here in the mountains, you have sent your husband from the province of Sado to visit me 3 times. How great is your sincerity! It is firmer than the great earth, deeper than the great sea. When he was Prince Sattva in a previous existence, the thus come one Shakyamuni gained merit by feeding his body to a starving tigress. And when he was King Shibi, he gained merit by giving his flesh to a hawk in exchange for the life of a dove. And he declared in the presence of many treasures and the Buddhas of the 10 directions that he would transfer this merit to those who believe in the Lotus Sutra as you do in the latter day of the law. Everybody remembers that? Right? The merit of all Buddhas is shared amongst all Buddhas, right? And that's the predication source of that. You say in your letter that the 11th day of the 8th month of this year marks the 13th anniversary of your father's passing. You also note that you are enclosing an offering of 1,000 coins. It is extremely kind of you to do so. Fortunately, I happen to have a copy of the Lotus Sutra in 10 volumes. I was wrong. It's 8 volumes plus the 2. That I would like to send you. When you think longingly of me, have Jaku Jobo read it and please listen to it. And in a future existence, you may use this copy of the sutra as a token of proof with which to search me out. In view of the epidemics that raged the year before last and this year, I was so concerned about how all of you were faring that I prayed earnestly to the Lotus Sutra. But still I felt uneasy. Then, on the 27th day of the 7th month, at the hour of the monkey, a Butsabo appeared. I asked him first how you were and how the lay priest of Ko was. He told me that neither of you had fallen ill and that the lay priest of Ko had set out along with him, but because the early rice was nearly ripe and because he had no sons to help him harvest it, he had no choice but to turn back. When I heard all this, I felt as if I were a blind man who had recovered his sight, or as if my deceased father and mother had come to me in a dream from the palace of King Yama, and in that dream I had felt great joy. It is a strange and wonderful thing, but both here and in Kamakura, very few of my followers have died from this plague. It is as if all of us were riding in the same boat, and though it would be too much to expect that we should all survive, still, just when disaster seemed to be upon us, another boat came out to rescue us. Or it is as if the dragon deities were watching over us and making it possible for us to reach the shore in safety. It is indeed wondrous. Concerning the lay priest Inochasawa, please tell his wife, the lay nun, that I am grieved to hear of his death, but I have already told her quite clearly how matters stand with her husband. Conveying the lay priest, stand with her husband, and she will no doubt recall my words. Let me start to say this again. Concerning the lay priest Ichinosawa, please tell his wife, the lay nun, that I am grieved to hear of his death, but I have already told her quite clearly how matters stand with her husband, and she will no doubt recall my words. Regardless of the fact that he had a hall in his house dedicated to Amida Buddha will never save an enemy of the Lotus Sutra. On the contrary, such a person renders himself a foe of Amida Buddha. After his death, he must have fallen into the evil paths of existence and been filled with deep regret. It is a great pity. I am mindful, however, that the lay priest Ichinosawa on several occasions saved my life by hiding me in a corridor of his residence, and I have therefore tried to think of something that can be done for him. Will you please ask Gakujobo to read the Lotus Sutra regularly at his grave? Even so, I do not think that this will enable him to reach enlightenment. Please tell his wife, the lay nun, that I grieve at the thought of how desolate and lonely she must feel. I will write more at another time. Nichiren, the 28th day of the 7th month, to the wife of a Butsubo in the provincial capital of Sato. And I forgot to read the background to begin this, so let me go on and read the background. This letter, I'm a little bit early, this letter was written at Minobu on the 28th day of the 7th month of the first year of Koan, the day after a Butsubo, a lay follower, arrived on his third journey from Sato Island to visit Nichiren Daishonin. This letter is the Daishonin's answer to one that a Butsubo had delivered from his wife, the lay nun Shinichi. Some scholars maintain that the lay nun Shinichi served as an attendant to a court lady accompanying the retired emperor Jontoku during his banishment to Sato after the Jokyu disturbance in 1221, but it is more likely that she was a native of the island. She and her husband were devoted followers of the Daishonin and supplied him with food, writing materials, and other necessities for more than 2 years until his pardon in 1274. After the Daishonins moved to Minobu, the lay nun sent her husband with offerings to visit him there at least 3 times. In the first portion of this letter, the Daishonin emphasizes the superiority of the Lotus Sutra from the standpoint of its teachings that women can attain Buddhahood. The provisional teachings, he says, deny that women can attain Buddhas. Only the Lotus Sutra clearly reveals that they are able to do so. The Daishonin declares that the enlightenment of women as taught in the Lotus Sutra shows that all living beings can attain Buddhahood in their present form. He then takes up the subject of repaying one's debt of gratitude to one's parents, especially to one's mother. Since the Lotus is the only sutra that guarantees the enlightenment of women, he says, it is also the only one that truly enables one to requite one's mother's kindness. Nevertheless, the women of Japan reject both the Lotus Sutra and its votary and chant only the name of Amida Buddha. But, says the Daishonin, Amida will never protect an enemy of the Lotus Sutra. Thus he shows that the one vehicle of the Lotus Sutra is the basis of all Buddhist teachings. While in exile on Sato, the Daishonin was harshly treated by many of the islanders. The lay nun Shinichi and her husband, however, risked their personal safety to serve him and maintained their faith despite many hardships. So, he acknowledges in this Gosha that they had even lost their fief. They had had their properties seized because of their support of the Daishonin at a point in time. Okay? Does anybody have any questions? Comments? Does everybody understand the point of the Gosha?
Yes.
Women especially must support the Lotus Sutra. It is the only sutra that teaches that they have a path to Buddhahood
Yes.
in their present form without having to grow penises. Okay? Really, this is the whole point. How much sense does that make? It doesn't. All people, all humans, all life is equal. This is the teaching of great equality of the Lotus Sutra. So, next week we'll read President Keita's lecture.
Yes.
We'll take a break for a week. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.